Hi, welcome to Chaos Chats, where we talk about all things sci-fi, fantasy, and comics. We're your hosts. I'm Michael Portis.
And I'm Stephen Portis. And in light of the new release of Spider-Man No Way Home, we've decided to count down our list of favorite alternate Spider-Man. With this movie being about alternate universes, we thought we'd explore all the different Spider-Men the multiverse has to offer.
There's some really cool Spider-Man out there, so we're excited to get into our top 5.
So we'll start with our number 5, Miles Morales.
Miles Morales is a very interesting and decently recent, well, I say recent, but it's been a few years. Recent, I guess, total history, Spider-Man, and he has been nothing but a fascinating character. I mean, he's introduced in some of the newer movies, such as Into the Spider-Verse. He is in the games now. He's a very popular character, and he's a very rich character because there's a lot of fascinating things that make him unique and different and cool.
Yes, he is a very popular character. Some of you might even be thinking, why is he so low on the list? But you know, there's so many to choose from.
So many great Spider-Man.
He's technically pretty high to even make this list.
So, talking about where Miles came from, he was his uncle was is the Prowler, which is a thief kind of character in the Ultimate Comics universe. And whenever the Prowler was making a hit, there was a spider that got loose and traveled with him to his apartment. Now, this Prowler was Miles's uncle. So, on a visit of Miles's to his uncle's house, he was bitten by that spider, and things were never the same.
Yes, he had his powers, but he decided not to do anything. He just decided to live as a normal boy while Peter Parker remained being the Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe. That was until, with a battle with the Green Goblin, Peter Parker was killed. Miles feels very guilty about this because he could have done something. Miles had his powers for like 11 months before Spider-Man died, so he knew about them, and he chose not to fight crime and help Peter. So it's like he felt guilty, so he picked up a Halloween costume and decided that I'm going to be Spider-Man now.
And after a brief run through that costume and the general public eye considering it in poor taste due to the recent death of Spider-Man, he was taken in to custody by S.H.I.E.L.D. and trained and given a new outfit and a new look to become the new Spider-Man of the Ultimate Universe.
Yes, and with an interesting array of powers. The usual Spider-Man powers, you know, he could stake the walls, he's fast, can jump high, and he has web shooters.
What makes him different is his spider sense is a little less attuned than Peter's. A little more immediate danger related, as opposed to Peter's giving him usually at least a little bit more leeway as far as understanding where the danger's coming from.
Yep, and he's also able to camouflage, turn invisible, blend in with his surroundings.
Possibly his most famous feat is his ability to sting people with his venom sting. Electric blast that seems to be able to incapacitate even some of the strongest people.
Yes, this electric blast seems to be his most powerful attack, and definitely sets him apart from Peter.
I respect Miles' character growth and who he is as Spider-Man. He's definitely not Peter, and you know that makes for a good, different Spider-Man. It makes him a fascinating character, and he goes through his own struggles and trials, wanting to be recognized as Spider-Man, considering, you know, he's the new Spider-Man.
He's his own character. When he's first introduced, you're just thinking, oh, it's just another Spider-Man. But he has really grown into the role himself. And Peter respects him, and, well, the main Peter, since Miles has left the Ultimate Universe after it was destroyed.
Right. Miles is now an official part of the main continuing of Spider-Man comics, or Marvel Comics in general. And Peter has given him a sort of recognition in his role as Spider-Man, and that's a big honor for Miles, considering he watched Peter die in front of his eyes. So I think having that reassurance from Peter Parker was just a big boost in his direction. And I think Miles is going to continue to fascinate us, and he's going to be in the new Into the Spider-Verse movie that's coming out next year. So pretty excited to see what goes on there and what further storytelling they can do with Miles' character in those sets of movies. I'm excited to see what happens.
Yes, we all are. And now we'll move on to our number 4, which is another popular Spider character, Spider-Gwen.
Spider-Gwen is the result of the original love interest of Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy, who in the original universe, the 616 universe, if you will, she tried to court with Peter and eventually turned him over to her favor, finding that they were a solid couple. I'm pretty sure Stan Lee saw a pretty bright future for those two being together as a solid couple. But tragedy struck Peter Parker as when he tried to save Gwen Stacy from the Green Goblin, he accidentally snapped her neck by catching her, and with the force of the web catch, it snapped her neck. However, in this universe, things get flipped around a little bit. Instead, it talks about how Gwen got bitten by the spider and not Peter.
Yes, and she didn't become a hero starting out, but she did kind of use her powers selfishly, like Peter does at first with the wrestling thing. Only instead of wrestling, she starts a band. She also sticks up for Peter when it comes to bullies, which gives Pathetic Parker, as they called him, inferiority complex. He was jealous that she had powers. I mean, she kept her identity a secret, but she told her best friend Peter. And he was very jealous. So, and, he wanted to stick up for himself. So he developed a serum to give him abilities, which turned him into the Lizard.
Unfortunately, this transformation was lethal. After Gwen finds a way to fight him off and beat this form of the Lizard, Peter suffers a side effect that is fatal, and he ends up dying in her arms. And from then on, Gwen vows to become the hero that she was meant to become. And in her best friend Peter's memory, she goes on to become Spider-Woman.
Yes, and she goes on Spider-Woman for a long time. She goes by Ghost Spider now, because she has also found herself in the main 616 universe. And with that, Gwen Stacy being dead, she feels like she's a ghost, so she named herself Ghost Spider.
Also, so let's talk about Gwen's powers. Spider-Gwen's powers are pretty much the same as Spider-Man's. Sticking to walls, web shooters for the web fluid, swinging around, super strength, spider senses. You name it, she's got it, and she's just really, really good at doing it. Spider-Gwen's pretty famous in the comics for her interdimensional travel, so being somebody of all, trying to save all the connecting spider universes, you got to be pretty good at what you do.
And also, recently, she has lost her powers to another spider character named Silk, who took them away. And she now gets her powers from her universe's version of Venom, which is a very different take on Venom, but it gives her spider powers back.
And she looks pretty cool in the suit, too. If you haven't seen any images, I'm sure we're popping up one right now. The cool things about Gwen is she's young in high school, just like Peter started out. She's in a rock band with some of her best friends. It's called the Mary Janes, and Mary Jane is in it, and Glory Grant and Betty Brant. They're all in the rock band together. She's the drummer. She ends up meeting Peter, the main continuity Peter 616, and they end up kind of swapping conversations on how they both lost their respective Peter and Gwen, and they kind of vow to watch each other's back in that story arc, just saying, hey, we acknowledge each other's ability. Let's just watch each other's back going forward so that we don't lose each other again. And while it's a different dynamic because Peter is inevitably older than she is, it still was a really cool interaction to see come to life.
Yes, she is a very unique spider character, not being Peter Parker, of course, and not being, your typical spider person. I mean, not just that she's a girl, but for the first time we see Gwen Stacy with powers. It's even a different take on Gwen Stacy as a character. So she's very unique, and it's very easy to see why she grew in popularity so quickly. And, that's why she was able to make the list here.
She makes for a fascinating take on what if Peter was the one who passed, and she had that responsibility. So it's a really cool dynamic, and there's a lot of interesting stories that's come from her. So she made number 4.
All right, so now for number 3, which is another unique Spider-Man, and our first Peter Parker on the list, SpiderMan Noir.
SpiderMan Noir is what you call a slightly different take on Peter Parker's story, considering it takes place in the 30s. He is a fairly jaded character who watched his Uncle Ben die in a very brutal way by some gang members, even fed to that universe's Vulture, who was a cannibal. And that gave rise to this sense of justice that came in him. So he became a reporter to do that work. However, he stumbled upon some sort of spider god that gave him the spider abilities that we know that he has now. He went on with his spider powers to make sure that the same insurgents that killed his Uncle Ben would never do it again, as he went on his quest for justice in a very dark and kind of Batman-esque way.
Oh, yes. And as far as his powers go, he's mostly the same as the basic Peter Parker powers, except for he has organic webbing.
His organic webbing, he can't seem to swing with it very well. A lot of it's more of a netting kind of splatter. He has his classic spider sense, and he's got his super strength, but his super strength I don't think is quite on par with the normal Peter Parker's super strength. His suit is made of a Kevlar substance that allows him to avoid a lot of damage from bullets and explosions. So when he came prepared.
Yes, and he definitely came prepared, since he also likes to carry around a revolver with him.
He doesn't often use it, but he does carry it on him, and he's had some hard fights, but he is a very worthwhile Spider-Man for this list. He is a very kind of a dark take on what Peter Parker could be as Spider-Man. And it's always fascinated me, some of the routes that they take with him. And while he is a very serious version of Spider-Man, and I'm often into the Spider-Man with the quips, he just had the way the 1930s feel, the noir take on his character, the outfit, just the feeling that they give off with these comics is just wonderful. And he's only got two relatively short comic series, and they're both just jam-packed with some interesting storytelling, which makes for a very interesting Spider-Man and a very interesting take on who Peter Parker is.
And this is what makes him the number 3 on this list. And now we'll move on to number 2, and that is Ben Reilly, Scarlet Spider. And I know, maybe some of you are like, well, hey, he's not really an alternate universe version. But actually, there are alternate universe Ben Reillys.
Ben Reilly is a fascinating character with a long history, starting out as a nameless clone of Spider-Man's that the Jackal made to oppose Spider-Man and to get revenge on Spider-Man for killing Gwen Stacy, because the Jackal had a love for Gwen Stacy.
Yes, but when this unnamed Spider-Man clone seemingly died, years later, turns out he didn't. And he made a return, and the Jackal was ready to use him to kill Spider-Man again. But turns out, this clone with the memories of Spider-Man was just as heroic. So the two teamed up together and beat the Jackal. And from there, things kind of, bounce around a bit, because in the long clone saga, where it seems Peter Parker learns that he's the clone and Ben Reilly's the real Peter Parker, so they kind of switch lives, and Peter settles down with Mary Jane while Ben does the Spider-Man job. But that doesn't even last long when they find out, the Green Goblin actually planted this information, and it was actually Peter who was the real Peter. Surprise. But I mean, it was at the time it was pretty flip-flop, and you wasn't sure who was the real Spider-Man until Ben Reilly dies against the Green Goblin, and he disintegrates quickly, which was a side effect of being one of the Jackal's clones, solidifying that Peter was the real Spider-Man. But Ben has returned much later. It's been a little shady in that history.
A lot going on in the recent comics.
With him being tortured by the Jackal, dying and coming back to life, and he comes back, and he tries to be the Jackal until Spider-Man stops him, and he tries to have a redemption arc, but it turns out all the times he's died is turning his soul black. But finally, he's got that taken care of. But the last time he dies, he comes back and his soul's purified, and he's finally off to be a hero.
And it seems he's taking Peter's place once more as the main Spider-Man right now. More details in more recent comics, I suppose. As far as his powers and abilities, he pretty much has all the exact same powers as the Peter Parker Spider-Man.
Yes, that being because he is a clone of Peter Parker. One thing is, early on in his Scarlet Spider career, he spent some extra time on his web shooters, and therefore he didn't have to do the classic Spider-Man hand pose to shoot webs. He could just flick his wrist and create whatever kind of web he wanted to.
Depending on different wrist variations, apparently he was able to shoot out whatever kind of web he wanted, whether it was a web ball, a web string, a web net, what have you.
This made for a faster, more efficient web slinging abilities that he put to good use during his heroic time.
He was a good Spider-Man, and he's an interesting character. It's an interesting take on the character, considering while he is a clone of Peter Parker and had some similar, Parker luck experiences, he is a different character. He's been through different things. He knows different people, and he fell in love with a girl too. They all these experiences for the character have added up to equal a just all-around fascinating, long history character with information we're still learning about in today's comics. But it's been an interesting ride with him, and he's got such a rich history. It makes for a good character.
Yeah, so as the first real alternate Spider-Man that was introduced to us, he holds up as being a great character.
And that is why he's our number 2.
And before we get to number 1, we're going to do some honorable mentions.
These are Spider-Men who didn't quite make the top 5 list, but who are worth mentioning anyway.
We have Superior Spider-Man, the Spider-Man where Dr. Octopus took over Peter Parker's body.
We have Spider-Ham, the cartoon pig spider.
We have Spiders-Man, a collection of spiders that form a human shape and think they are Peter Parker.
We have Spider-Britain, who's the British alternate universe version of Spider-Man.
And we have Spider-Man from Marvel's Spider-Man PS4 game.
Which is a phenomenal version of Peter Parker, by the way. If you haven't played the game, his story in it is one of the greatest. Just totally say it.
Now for our number 1 alternate Spider-Man. It's the Spider-Man from the future, Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099.
Spider-Man 2099, Miguel O'Hara, his origin is very different from your classic Peter Parker story. Hired by Alchemex, a company of the future, he was a gene splicer of sorts, with a kind of a dream to splice the genes and recreate the original Spider-Man, but it was simply a dream. Inevitably, he got conned by his boss, Mr. Stone, and he would drug his employees to make sure that they stayed loyal and did what he wanted so that they would continue to come back to him. So Miguel was a victim of Tyler Stone's drug abuse, pretty much. In order to free himself from that drug abuse, Miguel sought to splice his DNA to remove that addiction from it. However, a greedy employee of Alchemex that just wanted to rise up the chain found him and decided to turn up all the meters on his devices, and it ended up overloading the equipment and making the lab explode. However, to his surprise, because Miguel survived the explosion. And just as that employee was blaming Miguel for the explosion, Miguel turns around and he's just this disfigured, fanged creature that this person becomes scared of. So he's, in an attempt to kill Miguel, he tries shooting him, but inevitably the lab explodes because of the shots, and it kills that employee. Miguel goes on to become something of a selfish hero, donning a outfit that he would have for the Day of the Dead, considering his Hispanic heritage. And he went on to become the 2099 Spider-Man, using some the outfit he used for Day of the Dead, and even some netting that he got from some Thor worshippers that allowed him to glide with his webbing on the back of his suit.
Yes, and after some time, he actually crosses over with the modern day Spider-Man, in which, working together with him, he learns he wants to be a hero just like Peter was. And from there, he goes on to be a hero in his own time.
2099 Spider-Man doesn't just face his foes with your basic spider power set. While he does don some of the normal abilities of Spider-Man, such as super strength, webbing, his webbing is natural, coming from spinnerets on his wrists, on the upper part of his wrists. He also doesn't swing very much. He glides around a lot with that webbing on the back of his suit. He has talons that allow him to stick to the walls, or claws, if you will. That allow him to sit on his feet and his fingers, that allow him to stick to the wall, and are a deadly weapon against enemies. He has fangs that can paralyze the likes of the Submariner if he bites you with them. And he also, as a side effect, he has kind of a sunlight sensitivity as well, which is why you'll often see him wearing sunglasses, and why he often goes out at night as Spider-Man. Miguel is just a very all-around different kind of Spider-Man.
He definitely does the role differently. He's not a very, quippy, funny Spider-Man. He's very more serious toned.
Very straightforward in his actions, driven by his own character. He also has an AI that he talks to a lot, who helps him out in some of the harder situations. But in the end, he's always tried to look out for his future, his time, and tried to be the hero that he saw in Spider-Man whenever he first met him. And he's just such a cool iteration of the character. His look is unique and iconic. His talons make for a deadly, awesome take on what Spider-Man could be, on different abilities for him as a spider character. He's just a really cool take on Spider-Man as a whole, and I think Miguel O'Hara is just an interesting character, being the alchemist scientist he was. And that is why Spider-Man 2099 is at the top of our list.
Well, thank you for watching our video. Let us know what you think of our list. Of course, this is our opinions. So we want to hear your opinions. What are your favorite Spider-Men? What are your favorite alternate Spider-Man?
What are some alternate Peter Parkers that you like? What are some non-Peter Parkers that you like? Do you like Spider-Man in general as a character? There's a lot of interesting questions. We'd like to hear your opinion.
Oh yes, and we'd even like to know your top 5 if you have several, like we do. And actually, we're going to be dishing out other lists along with more movie reviews. So if you have any suggestions for lists we should do, let us know. And also be sure to check out our other channel, Chaos Reigns. We'll have a link for that in the description too.
If you liked this video, please like it for the exposure and subscribe so that you can get some all-inclusive nerddom video content as we enjoy talking about the chaos of what we love. We'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these lists, so just let us know.
Yeah, and share it with your friends. Let them see and learn stuff about Spider-Man characters that they might not know.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for chatting.